Hello everyone and welcome to Fatma Sami's channel. Today's video is for the 7th grade semester 1. We're gonna do some exercises on Unit 5, class book. Unit 5, that's entertainment. Exercise number 1, look and answer. Look at the pictures on this page and guess where Ahmed was last night. When Ahmed got home, he wrote some notes about the things that were happening at the Muscat Festival. Look at Ahmed's notes about the photographs. Unfortunately, he made some mistakes. Can you correct them? Let's read the notes and correct them. Let's read the notes and see if they were true or false and correct the mistake. A. There were men dancing. True. B. There were women playing music. False. The answer is there were men playing music. C. There were women riding donkeys. False. The answer is there were children riding donkeys. D. There were children singing. False. The answer is there were women singing. C. There was a man making a rug. True. Exercise number 2. Listen, think and match. Listen to Ahmed talking to his friends at school the next day. Did they see him on television? Listen carefully. Ahmed, I was interviewed on Oman TV. Did you see me? Ahmed's friends, no. Ahmed, oh, what were you doing, Kalfan? Kalfan, well, I was reading my new comic. It was great. Ahmed, oh, what about you, Talib? Talib, I was at the cinema watching the new Mr. Dean film with my dad. Ahmed, oh, and what about you, Walid? Walid, I was watching Oman versus Bahrain football match with my brother. It was fantastic. Ahmed, oh, did you see me on television, Isa? Isa, no, I'm really sorry, I didn't. I was playing with my new computer game. Oh, well, never mind. My dad recorded it, so you can watch it on a video if you like. All Ahmed's friends? Oh, that would be great. Now listen again and find the picture that shows what each boy was doing last night. We already listened to the conversation. Now let's see the answers. Picture number 1 matches Isa. He was playing computer games. Picture number 2 matches Talib. He was watching a film with his dad. Picture number 3 matches Walid. He was watching a football match with his brother. Picture number 4 matches Kalfan. He was reading his new comic. Exercise number 3. Talk. Look at the pictures of Ahmed's friends again. Work with a friend and make 6 true sentences about them. Make sentences like these. Isa was playing with his new computer game last night. Isa wasn't watching the fireworks last night. Let's make a sentence together. Kalfan was reading his new comic last night. Kalfan wasn't watching a film in the cinema last night. Exercise number 1. Look, listen and find. Look at the comic that Kalfan was reading last night. What do you think happened in the story? The friendly family and the crazy cats. Those crazy cats are out again. Keep your doors closed. You never know what they will do next. Last Thursday night, The friendly family were having a quiet night at home. Now listen and find out what happened. Then listen again and find which rooms these people are in. Listen carefully. Gosh, what happened in your home last Thursday night, Fiona? Oh, it was awful. These cats climbed in through the kitchen and went crazy. They had a party in the kitchen. Where were you? Oh, we were all at home, but we didn't see them. My dad was ironing in the living room and Grandma was with him sewing a scarf. What about your brother? Oh, Frank didn't hear anything. He was listening to music in his bedroom. My mom was in the study using the computer. She was looking for a new fish recipe. What were you doing? Oh, I was in my bedroom writing a letter. I didn't know anything had happened until I went to the kitchen to get a glass of milk. It was such a mess. Now, let's see where each person was. Number 1. Frank Friendly in his bedroom. Number 2. Mr. Friendly and Grandma Friendly were in the living room. Number 3. Fiona Friendly was in her bedroom. Number 4. Mrs. Friendly were in the study room. Now, can you guess which room is room number 5? You're right, it's the kitchen. Exercise number 2. Look and describe. Look at the picture of the crazy cats in the kitchen. What were they doing last Thursday night? Work with a friend and talk about what the cat were doing using the verbs in the box. Let's read the examples. Some cat were tying up another cat. Some cats were taking food from the fridge. Now, let's make a sentence together using one of the verbs in the box. Some cats were chasing mice. Exercise number 1. Read and match. Look at the pictures on pages 54 and 55. Ahmed decided to find out what some of his IKC friends were doing last Friday night. He sent them an email to ask them what they were doing while he was at the Muscat Festival. Look at each person's reply and match it to a poster. Now, let's go back to page 54 to read each person's reply. Paul: I was watching the musical Cats at the theater in London with my mom. It was great. Tarek: I was watching a basketball match. It was a fantastic game. Petra: I was watching the Belushi ballet dance Swan Lake with my sister. It was so romantic. Mailing: I was learning how to juggle at the circus school. It was great fun. Tushi: I was listening to the Kodo drummers in a concert with my dad. It was brilliant. Rose: I was dancing in the Nairobi Festival. I was very excited. Now, let's see the answers. Number 1, Paul. Number 2, Tarek. Number 3, Petra. Number 4, Tushi. Number 5, Rose. Number 6, Mealing. Exercise number 1. Look and match. We read stories in books and comics and we watch them on television and films and in plays at the theater. Look at these books covers and film posters. What kind of stories are they? Look at the definitions of different kinds of books and films and match each definition to a picture. The pictures and definitions are divided on pages 56 and 57. Let's read the definitions. Adventure. An exciting story in which dangerous or unusual things happen. Detective. A story where people try to solve a crime. Comedy. A funny story. Horror. A story where strange or frightening things happen. Romance. A story about love. Science fiction. Stories about life in the future or in another planet. Now, let's go back to page 56 and see the answers. Adventure is picture number 3. Detective is picture number 4. Comedy is picture number 2. Horror is picture number 5. Romance is picture number 6. Science fiction is picture number 1. Exercise number 2. Think and talk. What about you? Talk to a friend and tell them what kind of stories you like. Then find out what kind of stories your friend likes. Let's read the examples. What kind of stories do you like? I like adventure and detective stories, but I don't like science fiction. Exercise number 2. Listen and check. Listen to Maha talking about the stories she likes and her favorite author. Listen carefully and find her favorite kind of story and her favorite author. Listen carefully. What's your favorite kind of story? Oh, I love detective stories. I like looking at the clues in the story and trying to solve the crime myself. Do you have a favorite author? Oh yes, I love Agatha Christie's stories. She wrote great detective stories. Let's see the answers. Favorite story is C. Detective. Favorite author is B. Agatha Christie. Exercise number 4. Read and answer. Read the poster and answer the questions on page 64 of your skills book. Who done it? The missing. Mr. Dollar. Mr. Dollar was very rich. He made lots of money buying and selling diamonds. Mr. Dollar was an unkind, bad-tempered man. His sister, Mrs. Mob, was a widow. She and her 2 children, Lenny and Larry, lived with Mr. Dollar. Mr. Barker. Mr. Barker, the butler, hated Mr. Dollar. He liked Mrs. Mob and tried to help her with the housework when he could. Mr. Dollar always shouted at him and paid him very little money. He wanted to stop working for Mr. Dollar, but he had no other job. Mrs. Mob. Mrs. Mob was Mr. Dollar's sister. When her husband died, she had to live with her brother and look after his house. Mr. Dollar didn't pay her much money. He was very mean. Mrs. Mob was very hard-working, but she was very unhappy. She wanted to save money to send her son to university. Lynn Mob. Lynn liked her uncle because he bought her lots of presents. She was very pretty but very selfish. She didn't help her mother in the house and she was very untidy. Lynn always wanted money from her mother to buy new clothes. Mr. Dollar wanted Lynn to marry a rich friend of his. Mr. Green. Mr. Green had worked for Mr. Dollar for more than 20 years. He was very lazy and always asked Larry to help him with work in the garden. Mr. Green was very unhealthy and smoked a lot. He owed a lot of money to some friends he played cards with. Larry Mob. Larry didn't like his uncle because he was so horrible to his mother. Larry was very kind and hardworking and helped his mother in the house. He was very unselfish. He wanted to save money so his mother didn't have to work for Mr. Dollar anymore. Exercise number 1. Read and answer. Look at the pictures of people on pages 58 and 59. They show all the characters that were in the play that Maha saw last week. Quickly read the descriptions of the characters and answer these questions. We already read the description of each character. Now, let's read the questions and answer them. Number 1. Who hated Mr. Dollar? Mr. Barker. Number 2. Who was very lazy? Mr. Green. Number 3. Who was very unhappy? Mrs. Mob. Number 4. Who liked Mr. Dollar? Lynn Mob. Number 5. Who was very mean? Mr. Dollar. Number 6. Who was very kind? Mrs. Mob. Exercise number 1. Read, look and answer. Detective Clueless is at the scene of the crime. Read his report and look at the pictures and the house plan on pages 58 and 59 to help you answer these questions. Police report number 254. Yesterday afternoon, the Amazon diamond was stolen from Mr. Dollar's study. It was stolen between 3 and 3:30 in the afternoon. When I arrived, Mr. Dollar was in the study. He was very angry. I checked the room. I noticed the windows were open. There were fingerprints on the desk and the door to the study. They were the fingerprints of Mr. Dollar and Mrs. Mob. There were prints on the window as well. They were not fingerprints, they were footprints. There was also a white handkerchief on the floor near the window. There were 6 people in the house that afternoon. Mr. Dollar, the owner of the diamond. Mrs. Mob, Mr. Dollar's sister. Lynn and Larry, Mr. Dollar's niece and nephew. Mr. Green, the gardener. Mr. Barker, the butler. I interviewed all the people in the house and recorded their statements on tape. Now, let's read and answer the questions. Number 1. When was the diamond stolen? Between 3 and 3:30 in the afternoon. Number 2. Where was the diamond when it was stolen? In Mr. Dollar's study. Number 3. What people were in the house at that time? Mr. Dollar, Mrs. Mob, Lynn Mob, Larry Mob, Mr. Green, and Mr. Barker. Exercise number 2. Read and check. Read the detective's interviews with the people in the house. Find out where each person was and what they were doing. Mrs. Mob. Where were you? I was in the kitchen. What were you doing? I was cooking supper. Did you see anyone? Yes, I saw Mr. Green. He was in the garden. He was sleeping under a tree. Oh, and I saw Larry. He was putting plates on the table for supper. Lynn Mob, where were you? I was in the living room. What were you doing? I was listening to music. Did you see anyone? Yes, I saw Mr. Dollar. He was in the garden. He was having afternoon tea. Oh, and I heard my mother. She was singing in the kitchen. And I heard Larry. He was putting plates on the table for supper and he dropped a plate. I heard that crash. Mr. Barker, where were you? I was in the hall. What were you doing? I was answering the telephone. Did you see anyone? No. Mr. Dollar, where were you? I was in the garden. What were you doing? I was having afternoon tea. Did you see anyone? Yes, I saw Lynn in the living room. She was listening to music. Mr. Green, where were you? I was in the garden. What were you doing? I was sleeping under a tree. Did you see anyone? Yes, I saw Mrs. Mob in the kitchen. She was cooking supper. Larry Mob, where were you? I was in the dining room. What were you doing? I was putting plates on the table for dinner. Did you see anyone? Yes, I saw my mother in the kitchen. She was cooking supper. Exercise number 3. Listen and think. Detective Clueless decided to interview one more person to help him solve the crime. Listen carefully for this information. Do you mind if I asked you a few more questions? Oh, no, that's fine. Where were you between 3:30? I was in the dining room. What were you doing? I was putting plates on the table. Did you see anyone? Yes, I saw my mother in the kitchen. She was cooking supper. Did you hear anything? Well, my mother was singing when she was cooking, but I didn't hear anything else. Did you see what happened when Mr. Dollar went back to his study and found the diamond was missing? He screamed very loudly, and I went running to the study to find out what was wrong. I met my mother and Lynn in the hall. They had also heard the scream. Thank you very much, Larry. You have been very helpful. Number 1. Who is the detective Clueless interviewing? Larry Mob. Number 2. What new information did you hear? Mrs. Mob, Lynn Mob, and Larry Mob heard the scream of Mr. Dollar and ran into the hall. Detective Clueless now know who stole the diamond. Exercise number 4. Listen and check. Detective Clueless asked all the people who were in the house to join him in the study. He tells them that he knows who stole the diamond. Listen carefully to his explanation. I know who stole the diamond now. Lynn, it wasn't you. You were listening to music in the living room, and Mr. Dollar saw you. Mr. Green, it wasn't you. You were sleeping in the garden, and Mrs. Mob saw you. Mrs. Mob, your fingerprints were on the door to the study and on the desk. It wasn't you, though. Mr. Green saw you in the kitchen, and Lynn and Larry heard you. You were singing in the kitchen. Larry, it wasn't you. You were in the study putting plates on the table. Lynn heard you drop one, and when you heard Mr. Dollar shout, you came out of the dining room into the hall. Your mother and Lynn saw you. So the thief was you, Mr. Barker. You said you were in the hall answering the telephone. Larry was in the dining room and didn't hear the telephone ring or any talking on the telephone. Also, when Mr. Dollar discovered the diamond was missing, Mrs. Mob Larry, and Len came running into the hall. They didn't see you, but you said you were talking on the telephone in the hall. But how did he do it? He walked out of the front door and around the side of the house. Then he jumped in through the window and took the diamond. Mr. Dollar found the diamond was missing before Mr. Barker could get back into the house. But there were no fingerprints on the window. No, because Mr. Barker wiped the window with his handkerchief as he left. I believe this belongs to you, Mr. Barker. You dropped it as you left. We reached to the end of our video. Thank you for listening and watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.